Hi everyone. In the latest episode of Better Call Saul, we pick up where we left off in the mid-season finale, with Lalo having just killed Howard and Kim and Jimmy terrified of what has just happened. Lalo now instructs Jimmy that he must take Lalo's car and go to a specific address, ring the bell, and when someone opens the door, to shoot them with a revolver, which he has put in the car's glove compartment, along with a camera to photograph the body. This address is that of Gustavo Fring's. Jimmy is afraid to leave Kim with Lalo and persuades him to let her go instead, to which he eventually agrees. Kim does not want to do this, but isn't left with much choice and goes on her way. She is in such a state of shock that she almost forgets to put on her shoes before leaving the house until Lalo reminds her. Lalo hopes that by sending someone who is not known to Fring, Fring wouldn't be as cautious and could be caught out by the element of surprise. He knows that Kim will likely do what he has instructed her to do, as she is terrified by what has just happened to Howard and what could happen to Jimmy. As Kim is driving, she is waiting at a traffic light alongside a police car and is tempted to alert them of the horrible situation she finds herself in, even going so far as opening the window and making eye contact with one of the police officers. But she decides to carry on driving towards the house. Lalo made it clear that he expects she be back in an hour. As she gets out of the car and rings the bell, as soon as the door is opened, she pulls out the gun, but is immediately grabbed from behind by Mike and questioned by him. Kim is adamant she has to go back as soon as possible and tells Mike that Lalo is at her apartment and could kill Jimmy. Mike asks her why she was sent. Lalo had given her a description to shoot the man who wore glasses, was black, and looked like a librarian, who she pointed to and said she was instructed to kill him. Little did she know this was actually Gus's body double. Gus seems to have made the necessary preparations for a situation like this and was one step ahead of Lalo. Lalo, however, also had a trick up his sleeve. From his point of view, sending Kim to Gus's apartment was a win-win situation for him. One outcome would have been that she would have done the dirty work for him and killed Gus. The other outcome was that even if she failed to kill Gus, she would tell Gus's men to go to her apartment and protect Jimmy, who he had tied up. Gus's men would go to her apartment, expecting Lalo to be there, and therefore there would be less men protecting Gus, making him an easier target. With the knowledge he acquired from Casper in Germany, Lalo went straight to Gus's meth lab and waited for Gus to arrive. When Gus arrived with some of his men, Lalo came out of the shadows and shot dead all of Gus's guards. He had the chance to finish Gus there and then, but he didn't want to make it so easy. He wanted their superior, Don Eladio, to know what Gus had done, using a camcorder to film around the meth lab, or as Lalo called it, the big machine. Lalo mentions how Gus had built a meth lab under the cartel's noses and is trying to be the boss himself. Lalo shoots Gus, knowing he's wearing body armor, and asks Gus to give a tour of his big secret machine, which he says will now be his tomb. Gus then tells Lalo he won't be killed by him and rants about Eladio and the Salamancas, knowing that if his plan works, no one will ever see that footage. Gus, having prepared for a situation like this, acts quickly and kicks a power cord, which leaves them in darkness. A shootout in the dark then takes place, and Gus eventually runs out of bullets and for a moment is most likely very anxious about where Lalo is. Eventually, when he does manage to get some light back, much to his relief, Lalo is on the floor, covered with blood, barely alive, his last action being laughter before he dies. Imagine if this was set in the modern day, where live streaming would exist. Eladio would have known what Gus had been doing, and it could have ended much sooner for him than it actually did. The episode ends with Mike giving Kim and Jimmy an alibi for what happened with Howard. From the opening scene of the episode, we see Howard's car was abandoned by the sea, with his shoes floating in the water. Mike also mentioned that cocaine was planted in the car to make it seem more consistent with how Kim and Jimmy were trying to portray Howard as a drug addict. It would seem more logical that he had committed suicide after what had happened at the mediation meeting and the troubles he was having with his wife. Since his car was outside of Kim and Jimmy's apartment for hours, Mike tells them to say Howard came in and was in a drug-induced state and left. Mike deals with Howard's body and has him buried in Gus's lab alongside Lalo. Two men who could not be bigger polar opposites end up sharing the same fate. One a seasoned cartel criminal, the other a legitimate, hard-working, work-driven lawyer. Howard was someone at the wrong place at the wrong time and didn't at all deserve what happened to him. He was a good man and was a million miles away from the worlds of Lalo and the cartel, but because of Kim and Jimmy's greed to get the Sandpiper case settled, a decent man was killed. Jimmy as a character seems to have also become much more ruthless. Remember when Jimmy tried to get Sandpiper settled before? By trying to persuade Irene, the representative for the residents, to settle. When she didn't, he tried to cause a rift between her and her friends, and it worked, and eventually she agreed to settle, meaning he would get a big payoff. But he saw what he did to Irene's life. He saw how she became isolated as her friends were convinced by Jimmy that it was her fault they didn't get their money sooner. Jimmy felt very guilty, so much so he deliberately made sure all her friends heard him say that he only wanted her to settle so he would get his money and that he didn't care about any of the residents. Jimmy at the time was willing to sacrifice his payoff because he felt guilty about what he had done to Irene. Is this the same Jimmy that pretty much single-handedly ruined Howard's life, inadvertently leading to his death? Kim also seemed to be a big factor in Howard's downfall and had a bad influence on Jimmy, as initially Jimmy wasn't sold on the idea of ruining Howard's reputation. Jimmy even let Howard blame himself for Chuck's death, when really Jimmy was the one who was mainly responsible, as he exaggerated Chuck's condition to the malpractice insurance company, which was the reason that Howard had to force Chuck out, as the insurance premiums would increase exponentially as a result. Howard's legacy is now that of a drug-addicted, troubled individual who committed suicide when this couldn't be further from the truth. Kim's future is still not known. I would think she won't ever be the same after this experience. Jimmy has experienced the shootout in the desert and being held at gunpoint by Tuco, so I believe it won't affect him as much. I imagine it would be difficult for Kim just to carry on as if nothing has happened. Kim wanted Sandpiper to be settled, as her and Jimmy would get $2 million from the settlement, and she aspired to open her own public defender practice with the money, which has been her ambition for a long time. When she was planning to bring Howard down, she described it as only being a career setback for Howard. She would have never in her wildest nightmares have envisioned what ended up happening to Howard, and I don't think she'll be able to just go back to how it was. We shall see what happens next week. I hope that we see 1 or 2 episodes in the Gene timeline and see what dealing with the cartel and intimidating characters such as Walter White does to Jimmy, and how he deals with someone recognizing who he was from the previous Gene segment. It's still hard to believe we have just over a month until it's all over. Can't wait till next week. See you all then for another reaction. Please like, comment and subscribe. Thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.